The Japanese people are an ethnic group native to Japan. Japanese make up 98.5% of the total population of their country. Worldwide, approximately 130 million people are of Japanese descent. Of these, approximately 127 million are residents of Japan. People of Japanese ancestry who live in other countries are referred to as Nihonjin. The term ethnic Japanese may also be used in some contexts to refer to a locus of ethnic groups including the Yamato, Ainu, and Ryukyuan people. Language. The Japanese language is a Japonic language that is treated as a language isolate. It is also related to the Ryukyuan languages, and both are sometimes suggested to be part of the proposed Altaic language family. The Japanese language has a tripartite writing system using hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Domestic Japanese people use primarily Japanese for daily interaction. The adult literacy rate in Japan exceeds 99%. Religion. Japanese religion has traditionally been syncretic in nature, combining elements of Buddhism and Shinto. Shinto, a polytheistic religion with no book of religious canon, is Japan's native religion. Shinto was one of the traditional grounds for the right to the throne of the Japanese imperial family, and was codified as the state religion in 1868. Mahayana Buddhism came to Japan in the 6th century and evolved into many different sects. Today the largest form of Buddhism among Japanese people is the Jodo Shinshu sect founded by Shinrin. Most Japanese people profess to believe in both Shinto and Buddhism. The Japanese people's religion functions mostly as a foundation for mythology, traditions, and neighborhood activities, rather than as the single source of moral guidelines for one's life. Christianity in Japan is among the nation's minority religions. Fewer than 1%, or about 2.5 million, of Japanese are Christians. Many Japanese practice Christianity in the Diaspora, in Brazil, which is home to the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. About 60% of Japanese Brazilians are Roman Catholics, while 90% of Japanese Mexicans are Roman Catholic, and about 37% of Japanese Americans are Christians. Literature. Certain genres of writing originated in and are often associated with Japanese society. These include the haiku, tanka, and dai novel, although modern writers generally avoid these writing styles. Historically, many works have sought to capture or codify traditional Japanese cultural values and aesthetics. Some of the most famous of these include Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, about high-end court culture, Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings, concerning military strategy, Matsuo Bashozoku no Hosomichi, a travelogue, and Junichiro Tanizaki's essay, In Praise of Shadows, which contrasts Eastern and Western cultures. Following the opening of Japan to the West in 1854, some works of this style were written in English by natives of Japan. They include Bushido, The Soul of Japan by Nitobe Inozo, concerning samurai ethics, and the Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo, which deals with the philosophical implications of the Japanese tea ceremony. Western observers have often attempted to evaluate Japanese society as well, to varying degrees of success. One of the most well-known and controversial works resulting from this is Ruth Benedict's The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. 20th century Japanese writers recorded changes in Japanese society through their works. Some of the most notable authors included Natsume Soseki, Junichiro Tanizaki, Osamu Dazai, Yasunari Kawabata, Fumiko Anshi, Yukio Mishima, and Ryotaro Shiba. In contemporary Japan, popular authors such as Yu Murakami, Haruki Murakami, and Banana Yoshimoto are highly regarded. Arts. Decorative arts in Japan date back to prehistoric times. Jomon pottery includes examples with elaborate ornamentation. In the Yayoi period, artisans produced mirrors, spears, and ceremonial bells known as dotaku. Later burial mounds, or kofun, preserve characteristic clay haniwa, as well as wall paintings. Beginning in the Nara period, painting, calligraphy, and sculpture flourished under strong Confucian and Buddhist influences from China. Among the architectural achievements of this period are the Horyuji and the Yakushiji, two Buddhist temples in Nara Prefecture. After the cessation of official relations with the Tang dynasty in the 9th century, Japanese art and architecture gradually became less influenced by China. Extravagant art and clothing was commissioned by nobles to decorate their court, and although the aristocracy was quite limited in size and power, many of these pieces are still extant. After the Todaiji was attacked and burned during the Genpei War, a special office of restoration was founded, and the Todaiji became an important artistic center. The leading masters of the time were Unkei and Kaiket. Painting advanced in the Muromachi period in the form of Incan painting under the influence of Zen Buddhism as practiced by such masters as Sesshu Toyo. Zen Buddhist tenets were also elaborated into the tea ceremony during the Sengoku period. During the Edo period, the polychrome painting screens of the Kano school were made influential thanks to their powerful patrons. Popular artists created ukiyo-e, woodblock prints for sale to commoners in the flourishing cities. Pottery such as Imari ware was highly valued as far away as Europe. In theatre, No is a traditional, spare dramatic form that developed in tandem with Kyogen farce. In stark contrast to the restrained refinement of No, kabuki, and the explosion of color, uses every possible stage trick for dramatic effect. Plays include sensational events such as suicides, and many such works were performed in both kabuki and bunraku puppet theaters. Since the Meiji Restoration, Japan has absorbed elements of Western culture. Its modern decorative, practical, and performing arts works span a spectrum ranging from the traditions of Japan to purely Western modes. Products of popular culture, including J-pop, manga, and anime have found audiences around the world. Theories of origins. Irari Hakuseki, who knew in the 18th century that there were stone tools in Japan, suggested that there was shukashin in ancient Japan. And then Philip Franz von Siebold claimed that indigenous Japanese was Ainu people. Iha Fuyu suggested that Japanese and Ryukyuan people have the same ethnic origin, based on his 1906 research of the Ryukyuan languages. In the Taisho period, Tori Ayuzo claimed that Yamato people used Yayoi pottery and Ainu used Jomon pottery. A common origin of Japanese has been proposed by a number of scholars since Irari Hakuseki first brought up the theory, and Fuji Sadamoto, a pioneer of modern archaeology in Japan, also treated the issue in 1781. But after the end of World War II, Kotondo Hasabi and Hisashi Suzuki claimed that the origin of Japanese people was not the newcomers in the Yayoi period but the people in the Jomon period. However, Kazuro Hanihara announced a new racial admixture theory in 1984. Hanihara also announced the theory, dual structure model, in English in 1991. According to Hanihara, modern Japanese lineages began with Jomon people, who moved into the Japanese archipelago during Paleolithic times from their homeland in Southeast Asia. Hanihara believed that there was a second wave of immigrants from Northeast Asia to Japan from the Yayoi period, following a population expansion in Neolithic times. These newcomers then found their way to the Japanese archipelago sometime during the Yayoi period. As a result, miscegenation was rife in the island regions of Kyushu, Shikoku, and Honshu, but did not prevail in the outlying islands of Okinawa and Hokkaido, and the Ryukyuan and Ainu people continued to dominate there. Mark J. Hudson claimed that the main ethnic image of Japanese people was biologically and linguistically formed from 400 BCE to 1200 CE. Masato Shine opposed the dual structure model, and alleged that the genetic distance data show that the Japanese people originated in Northeast Asia, moving to Japan perhaps more than 30,000 years ago. On the other hand, research in October 2009 by the National Museum of Nature and Science al. concluded that the Minato-gawa man, who was found in Okinawa and was regarded as evidence that Jomon people came to Japan via the southern route, had a slender face unlike the Jomon. Eroto Takamiya of the Sapporo University suggested that the people of Kyushu immigrated to Okinawa between the 10th and 12th centuries CE. A 2011 study by Sean Lee and Toshikazu Hasegawa reported that a common origin of Japonic languages had originated around 2182 years before present origin of Jomon and Yayoi currently. The most well-regarded theory is that present-day Japanese are descendants of both the indigenous Jomon people and the immigrant Yayoi people. The origins of the Jomon and Yayoi people have often been a subject of dispute, and a recent Japanese publisher has divided the potential roots of the people living on the Japanese archipelago as follows: Aboriginals that have been living in Japan for more than 10,000 years. Immigrants from the northern route including the people from the Korean Peninsula, mainland China, Sakhalin Island, Mongolia, and Siberia. Immigrants from the southern route including the people from the Pacific Islands, Southeast Asia, and in some context, India. However, a clear consensus has not been reached. History. Paleolithic era archaeological evidence indicates that Stone Age people lived in the Japanese archipelago during the Paleolithic period between 39,000 and 21,000 years ago. Japan was then connected to mainland Asia by at least one land bridge, and nomadic hunter-gatherers crossed to Japan from East Asia, Siberia, and possibly Kamchatka. Flint tools and bony implements of this era have been excavated in Japan. Jomon people. Some of the world's oldest known pottery pieces were developed by the Jomon people in the Upper Paleolithic period, 14th millennium BC. The name Jomon, which means cord-impressed pattern, comes from the characteristic markings found on the pottery. The Jomon people were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, though at least one Middle to Late Jomon site, California, 1200 to 1000 BC, had a primitive rice-growing agriculture. They relied primarily on fish for protein. It is believed that the Jomon had very likely migrated from North Asia or Central Asia and became the Ainu of today. Research suggests that the Ainu retain a certain degree of uniqueness in their genetic makeup, while having some affinities with other regional populations in Japan as well as the Niks of the Russian Far East. Mark J. Hudson of Nishikishu University posits that Japan was settled by a proto-Mongoloid population in the Pleistocene who became the Jomon, and that their features can be seen in the Ainu and Okinawan people. The Jomon share some physical characteristics, such as relatively abundant body hair, with Caucasians, but anthropological genetics shows them to derive from a separate genetic lineage from that of Europeans. Anthropologist Joseph Powell of the University of New Mexico said that the Ainu descend from the Jomon people, who are an East Asian population with closest biological affinity with Southeast Asians rather than Western Eurasian peoples. Turner found remains of Jomon people of Japan to belong to Sundadont pattern similar with the southern Mongoloid living populations of Taiwanese, Aborigines, Filipinos, Indonesians, Thais, Borneans, Laotians, and Malaysians. Yayoi people around 400–300 BC, the Yayoi people began to enter the Japanese islands, intermingling with the Jomon. The Yayoi brought wet rice farming and advanced bronze and iron technology to Japan. Although the islands were already abundant with resources for hunting and dry rice farming, Yayoi farmers created more productive wet rice paddy field systems. This allowed the communities to support larger populations and spread over time, in turn becoming the basis for more advanced institutions and heralding the new civilization of the succeeding Kofun period. The estimated population in the late Jomon period was about 100,000, compared to about 3 million by the Nara period, taking the growth rates of hunting and agricultural societies into account. It is calculated that about 1.5 million immigrants moved to Japan in the period. Genetics. Y chromosome DNA. A 2007 study by Nonaka al. reported that Japanese males in the Kanto region, which includes the Greater Tokyo area and is the most densely populated region of Japan, mainly belong to haplogroup DM55, haplogroup O2b, haplogroup O3, or haplogroup CM130. Mitochondrial DNA. According to an analysis of the 1000 Genomes Project's sample of Japanese from the Tokyo metropolitan area, the mtDNA haplogroups found among modern Japanese include D, B, M7, G, N9, F, A, Z, M9, and M8. Single nucleotide polymorphism. A 2011 SNP consortium study done by the Chinese Academy of Sciences and Max Planck Society consisting of 1719 DNA samples determined that Koreans and Japanese clustered together, confirming the findings of an earlier study that Koreans and Japanese are closely related. However, the Japanese were found to be genetically closer to South Asian populations, as evident by a genetic position that is significantly closer towards South Asian populations on the principal component analysis chart. Some Japanese individuals are also genetically closer to Southeast Asian and Melanesian populations when compared to other East Asians such as Koreans and Han Chinese, indicating possible genetic interactions between Japanese and these populations. A 2010 large genome-wide association study of East Asian populations by Young-Sun Young al. found that the Japanese are closer to Han Chinese, but the Koreans are relatively far away from Han Chinese if compared to Japanese. This study also included Native Americans, Vietnamese, Cambodians, Europeans and Africans. It was also found in the same paper that, going by identity by state results, the Japanese are more related to the Vietnamese when compared to the Mongolians and Koreans. The Koreans and Mongolians were found to be the least genetically related to the Vietnamese. The Japanese were also more similar by IBS to the Mongolians than the Koreans were. However, further studies need to be conducted to infer about relationships between the Jomon Japanese and the genetic relationships to other East Asian ethnic groups to better understand the origins of the Japanese people. A 2008 study about genome-wide SNPs of East Asians by Chao Tian al. reported that Japanese, Koreans and Han Chinese are genetically distinguishable from Southeast Asians, and that the Japanese are related to Koreans who are related to Han Chinese. However, the Japanese are relatively genetically distant from Han Chinese if compared to Koreans. For some principal component analyzers, the Japanese are genetically similar to Cambodians, highlighting genetic similarity between these two ethnic groups. Colonialism. During the Japanese colonial period of 1895 to 1945, the phrase "Japanese people" was used to refer not only to residents of the Japanese archipelago, but also to people from colonies who held Japanese citizenship, such as Taiwanese people and Korean people. The official term used to refer to ethnic Japanese during this period was inland people. Such linguistic distinctions facilitated forced assimilation of colonized ethnic identities into a single imperial Japanese identity. After the end of World War II, many Nik people and Orok people from southern Sakhalin, who held Japanese citizenship in Karafuto Prefecture, were forced to repatriate to Hokkaido by the Soviet Union as a part of Japanese people. On the other hand, many Sakhalin Koreans who had held Japanese citizenship until the end of the war were left stateless by the Soviet occupation. Citizenship. Article 10 of the Constitution of Japan defines the term Japanese based on the Japanese nationality. Indeed, Japan accepts a steady flow of 15,000 new Japanese citizens by naturalization per year. The concept of the ethnic groups by the Japanese statistics is different from the ethnicity census of North American or some Western European statistics. For example, the United Kingdom census asks ethnic or racial background, which composites the population of the United Kingdom, regardless of their nationalities. The Japanese Statistics Bureau, however, does not have this question. Since the Japanese population census asks the people's nationality rather than their ethnic background, naturalized Japanese citizens and Japanese nationals with multi-ethnic background are considered to be ethnically Japanese in the population census of Japan. Professor John Lai from the University of California, Berkeley, in spite of the widespread belief that Japan is ethnically homogeneous, believe it is more accurate to describe Japan as a multi-ethnic society. Even though such claims have long been rejected by other sectors of Japanese society, such as former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso, who has once described Japan as being a nation of one race, one civilization, one language and one culture. As a result, the word kei is used when the Japanese citizen describe their origin of ancestors other than the Japanese archipelago. For example, Tanya Ishii, a former Japanese member to the Japanese Diet, referred herself as a Russian Japanese, since she had Russian roots from her maternal lineage. Diaspora. The term Nihonjin is used to refer to Japanese people who emigrated from Japan and their descendants. Emigration from Japan was recorded as early as the 12th century to the Philippines and Borneo, but did not become a mass phenomenon until the Meiji era, when Japanese began to go to the Philippines, United States, Canada, Peru, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. There was also significant emigration to the territories of the Empire of Japan during the colonial period. However, most such emigrants repatriated to Japan after the end of World War II in Asia. According to the Association of Nikkei Japanese Abroad, there are about 2.5 million Nihonjin living in their adopted countries. The largest of these foreign communities are in the Brazilian states of São Paulo and Paraná. There are also significant, cohesive Japanese communities in the Philippines, East Malaysia, Peru, Buenos Aires, Córdoba and Misiones in Argentina, and the U.S. states of Hawaii, California, and Washington. Separately, the number of Japanese citizens living abroad is over 1 million according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.